Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Presumption. I'm Sara Azari, joined by my partner in crime, Jim Griffin. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Sara. How are you today?
Good. How are you? And look who's here with us, Bakari Sellers.
What's going on? Hey, everybody.
How are you?
Hey, Bakari.
Finally.
It's an honor to be here.
Welcome, Bakari. So, look, before we start, I just want to tell Jim and everyone out there, I asked for Bakari's bio and a headshot like I do with everyone. And what I got was a Google Drive. I got a Google Drive of like 20 pictures and like 3 essays.
Welcome to my life. I have no idea what you got because I just send it to people to send to you.
Yeah, but thank you for giving me options. I appreciate that. You all know him. You've seen him on your screens. Him and I met on CNN, and Bakari is a colleague of Jim's down in South Carolina. But we connected on CNN. He's recently released his new book, The Moment. Find it on Amazon and wherever else you get your reads. He has a children's book, Who Are Your People?, inspired by his 2 twins, Sadie and Stokely, written to teach young Black readers about their history. He's also authored a New York Times bestseller, a memoir, My Vanishing Country. He hosts the Bakari Sellers podcast twice a week show where he discusses a variety of topics from politics, race, sports, media, the presidential campaign, and more. He was born into an activist family. His father, civil rights leader Cleveland Sellers, instilled core values in Bakari to continue in the tireless commitment to service. Bakari currently practices law with the Strom Law Firm in Columbia, South Carolina, where he handles criminal and civil rights matters. In 2006, he was the youngest African-American elected official in the nation at the age of 22 when he began serving on the South Carolina state legislature. In 2014, he was the Democratic nominee for lieutenant governor in South Carolina. In 2008, he served on President Obama's South Carolina steering committee. His ability to reach across the aisle to get things done has led to numerous achievements, including being named Time Magazine's 40 Under 40 and the Root 100 list of the nation's most influential African-American in 2015, and HBCU Top 30 Under 30 in July 2014. He's also a husband, father to those cute twins, and a marathon runner, and really hard to get a hold of. So, look, today we want to talk about a very news-making civil rights case, excessive force, use of force case that you recently filed in federal court. I think it's Cobbs versus 2 troopers in the state of Minnesota. You guys, yeah, give me one second. So it's Cobb versus Bakari. What's the lawsuit called?
So the lawsuit is actually filed as the estate of Ricky Cobb, and it's filed on behalf of the personal representative, who is his mother, Naira.
Okay.
And so Naira Fields Miller. And the officer, one of the officers' last name, the person who's actually been charged for his murder, is Lungergan. And the other is, we still don't know how to pronounce it, but it's Siede. Saidi is what I've been saying. Or
so one of these officers was Black and one of them was white. And then, right?
Both officers were white.
Oh, they were both white. Okay. Sorry, I read something there. So look, I mean, we have shared panels together about use of force cases. I think we were on Anderson Cooper about the Kim Potter case, and then Black While Jogging case, the Ahmaud Arbery case, and all kinds of, racist cases in the criminal justice system. But just because the news cycle has changed doesn't mean that these tragic events are not happening across the nation on our streets. So walk us through the facts of Cobbs and why this was excess use of force, because what I read was that the young man, when he was pulled over for some bullshit traffic stop, in that interaction, like he took his foot off the brake. And so, I mean, we all know a car is a deadly weapon, right? So what's the argument there that they should not have used force to shoot him?
All right, so you gotta back up there. You made some conclusory statements. So let's just back up slightly.
Okay.
Ricky Cobb. Yeah, no, Ricky Cobb was a young man in Minnesota. We know the history. I want to start by disabusing you of this notion of like I don't approach this from the theory that the interaction per se is racist. And I think that a lot of individuals who do this work or who commentate on this work try to look at this as being a racist act, or the fact that the cops were white and there may have been a black individual who was murdered, and
Yeah.
see some level of racism in that. And that is a um, that's just not a complete way to look at this. In fact, what I always say is that you have to look at the systems
Mhm.
that are in place, and it's not necessarily the actors in those systems, but it's the systems that we have. And so, um, Ricky Cobb is just another one in a long line of individuals who was murdered unjustly, and you know, had a system in this country that isn't broken, I would say, but works the way it's intended to, where law enforcement officers use deadly force or play, uh, jury and executioner on the side of the road. In this particular incident, he was pulled over for um, an issue that was minor at best, a violation that was minor at best. He did not have any warrants. He did not have actually the gun in the car. They didn't even know he had a gun in the car until after he was already dead. It was in the back seat.
Okay, let me push
Um,
back on that. The stop, yes, it was bullshit. It was like a taillights or something, right? Which we've heard
mhm.
before. But he did have a violation of, I don't know the law out there, but
Oh
here
yeah. So no, that there was an argument that he had a domestic violence order or
violated,
warrant.
which here is a
Yeah,
felony. I don't know what it is in Minnesota, but
yeah, but it's not a felony, and also it had expired, so that was not in place either. And so
oh,
you begin this interaction where you had your listeners believe somehow that a car is a deadly weapon, when in fact you cannot put yourself in, as an officer, you can't put yourself in harm's way. An officer, for example, cannot jump in front of a car. In this particular case, the officer jumped in the side of the car. The
mm,
other officer jumped in the side of the car
mm.
after Ricky had been asking numerous questions about, why are you stopping me? What is the issue? He was very articulate, very clear with officers. He did not use the car as a deadly weapon. He did not attempt to run anybody over or even flee. He never hit the gas. He lifted his foot off the brake. The officer fired one shot and it killed Ricky. There is as you both know, even if you want to make anyone believe that a car is a deadly weapon, you cannot fire into vehicles, particularly vehicles. Even if he was fleeing, I had a case, Andrew Brown, where they shot into the back of a vehicle. You cannot shoot at a moving vehicle.
Mm.
You cannot shoot at a vehicle that is going away. I mean, that's just common practice. And Jim knows my expert very well, I'm sure. I have none other than the illustrious Jeff Alpert from the University of South Carolina, who is one of the premier uh, civil rights experts in the country. He actually did the uh, uh, George Floyd case and many other
Mm.
cases for
Mm.
us. It's amazing. In South Carolina, we actually have the two preeminent, both plaintiff and defense oriented civil rights experts. One is Jeff Albert, the other is Seth Stoughton. Both of them teach criminal justice at the University of South Carolina. So we feel pretty good about this case. We filed our suit. It's a typical 1983 type
Mhm.
of lawsuit.
Mhm.
We are in, this case is unique. It's one of the rare cases I have. I'm probably in, I don't know, 25, 26 jurisdictions around the country with civil rights cases. And this is the one of two in which a law enforcement officer has actually been charged. The district attorney Moriarty has filed criminal charges against the officer who
Does
fired
that,
the deadly.
just for our viewers, does that help your civil case? The fact that wait, is he convicted or just charged?
He's charged. I mean, it helps the family. I mean, the family seeking justice, and so
Of
this
course,
is
of course.
rare. It's
I'm saying if
it's
he's convicted,
accountability.
what
So
happens?
uh, civilly, I don't think other than the information and the ability for me through discovery to be able to ascertain other facts and utilize an entire other investigative body or grand jury pool, something I wouldn't have access to.
Mhm.
Criminally, I mean, civilly, I don't really think that it matters one way or another. Um, he's going to have coverage in terms of insurance coverage from the state of Minnesota, regardless of whether or not he's convicted or not. But they have a very strong case against him. The prosecutor or the district attorney there in Hennepin County is amazing. She's doing great work. It's a very I've never seen anything like it per se. I've gone out there a number of times, spent a lot of time with the family. We've had hearings where we've had deputies from counties around the state of Minnesota show up in support of this officer. They've taken, days of leave off. We've had hundreds of officers and law enforcement show up at his hearings, which has just been kind of fascinating to see. And we've been attempting to change the narrative that somehow the officer is a victim and not my family. Lastly, I'll just tell you where we are procedurally. They filed a motion to stay the case because of the criminal proceeding.
Right, that's what I figured.
But that in civil rights cases, that's usually not the remedy or outcome. Usually, what happens is we're able to tailor discovery where we can do everything, but in all likelihood, depose the criminal defendant. The other officer we're arguing doesn't have standing because he's not been charged with a crime. So we'll see what happens. I don't know. I love the practice of law. I love going in and learning how to do this type stuff. But these civil rights cases are pretty draining.
Yeah, I'm sure. And when did this incident occur? Because you just filed the civil lawsuit, but like, when did this happen?
This was last summer. I don't know the exact date of
Okay.
it. The problem that I have, Sarah, is that I was on a show the other day with St. Louis NPR, and we were talking about Michael Brown, and I was confusing the date of Michael Brown with the date of Alton Sterling, with the date of Eric Gardner, with the date of Walter Scott.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just these things happen so frequently.
Regularly. Yeah.
Yeah, and Minnesota's a weird place because Minnesota actually had a settlement of a young lady, a white woman who was shot by law enforcement. They settled that for about $20 million. He actually went to prison. He was found guilty of manslaughter. And he, uniquely enough, was of African descent. And so Minnesota always, you've had Dante Wright, when the officer of 20 years thought that she was pulling out her taser, but she pulled out her weapon, and then she went to prison for a year, I believe. And then you also had Derek Chauvin. And so it's been a lot going on in this area. Ricky Cobb is just the next iteration.
Mentioned George Floyd. You mentioned something I don't remember, sorry, but were you on that case?
I was not on that case. That's Ben's case. That was Ben's case, and they moved pretty quickly. The first, Ben is an amazing lawyer. I absolutely love Ben. You guys have to get him on your show one day. Ben has been able to do something unique that many others before him have not. And Jim probably could echo this. Pete talks about it all the time, Pete Strom, who I work with. But civil rights cases about pre-George Floyd, not even 10 years ago, were probably worth $300,000. You get shot by a law enforcement officer, you get $300,000, $400,000 maybe. You weren't getting the caps in South Carolina. You weren't getting 600. Ben has been able to drive up the value of Black lives in this country. And it's been fascinating to be a part of his team on a lot of cases. We did the Andrew Brown case together. We've done a lot of cases around the country together. We actually represented she's still a Jane Doe because she was a minor. It was in Pickens County, I want to say. She was in a car with a gentleman who was fleeing from police. He somehow they ended up on a hill in the dark. They let the dog go. The dog mauled her. They didn't know whether or not she was a co-defendant or a kidnapped victim or whatever. And then they fired shots. They heard a shot, and then they fired shots into the darkness. They couldn't see. The shot they heard was actually this young man killing himself. So they fired shots, ended up shooting my client, and killed their own dog. So it was we do. I did that case with Ben as well. We do these cases around the country, and they just
do you find that they settle, or are you almost always going to trial?
No, they settle. There's usually one of two options, and trial is usually not one of those options. So, for example, I have the Jarvis Randall case, which is in Southern Florida, where my guy was going through a mental health break inside a mental health facility. He barricaded himself into the doors, and the mental health hospital, for some reason, called the Broward County Sheriff's Department. The Broward County Sheriff's Department, he threw a brochure, metal like brochure, whatever you put brochures in, up in the ceiling, and it broke like the little plexiglass. He wrapped the brochures around the glass, and he had it in his hands. The Broward County Sheriff's Department opened up the door, shot a beanbag, missed, and then later shot him 30 times, right? And that case was
30
dismissed on,
times?
yeah, that case was dismissed on summary judgment.
Oh.
So my case is either we get dismissed on summary judgment or we settle.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, Bakari. I clerked with a federal judge 150 years ago, and we started getting 1983 cases. And as a law clerk, he was a brand new judge. I'm diving into this, and the law is really complicated in the area. So you don't take one of these cases lightly. You have to have a lot of experience, and you obviously do, and Ben Crum does. But it's a high hurdle to prove, and there's qualified immunity, and that's been debated in Congress as to whether they should abolish qualified immunity. In fact,
explain qualified immunity, Jim.
I let Bakari explain it.
So basically, it's when you have, so there are two prongs. One is more difficult than the other. They're both really high bars, though, as Jim put it. Yeah. But basically, you have to have it's a reasonable officer standard. And if he had a reasonable belief that his life or the life of others were in danger, then he can just shoot you or run you over or whatever it may be, which is just a weird type of, it's a weird nexus because you have to put yourself in that officer's shoes at that particular time. And so when you're evaluating these cases, cases that involve weapons are usually cases that aren't good unless I usually ask one question. Where was he shot? That's the most important thing. Because if he was shot in the back, 9 times out of 10, that is an awful shoot. You can't shoot people in the back. Even if they have a weapon, you can't shoot people in the back.
Yeah.
And the other prong to qualified immunity is that you have to literally prove case law with facts that are similar to your case at hand. Like there's no such thing as having a novel set of facts in civil rights.
I mean, the prong is that the officer has to, knowingly violate a well-establised legal right.
Well-established law. Yeah. And it's
so you have to have a case on all fours before,
Correct.
So, in South Carolina and a lot of other states, they, used to have the dog could bite one time. The second time a dog bit, they're liable, but we did away with the first dog bite rule. But now, there's still the first, bad cop rule. So if you get the first bad cop in a factual scenario, then he gets away. That's pretty much it, isn't it, Bakari?
Yeah, that's it. It's a very, very high bar. They're very expensive. And as you both know, from the plaintiff side of the work that you all do, a little bit of it at least, that money goes out the door. You don't get it back for 3-4 years. So, these cases, I tell my families all the time, like, well, I'll spend whatever money is necessary. These cases, are $100,000 expenditures for us. I just recently we were involved in mediation, and a lot of times they involve a political aspect because cities or states have to approve those settlements. And so I was in Colorado Springs recently for Dalvin Gatz and Ochoa is my client's name. And he was brutally beaten. The officer's fists were bloody, and they took a picture of his fist, and he was smiling. And he beat my guy really, really, really bad. And he had some long-term brain issues from that beating that he suffered. And so we have a lot of cases. I'm in Austin, I'm in San Diego.
You take these cases, you have to be able to, speaking of the costs, obviously, you really have to know whether, like, what the risk is, right? Or what the chances are that your family would prevail, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I don't know about chances, but you want to get rid of the bad cases quickly. Sometimes we take cases. We're in Baton Rouge right now. Where you have to investigate cases because a lot of Southern, in particular, law enforcement agencies aren't known for their transparency.
Oh,
So
mm.
it
You know,
takes
I
some digging.
always thought there's weird things going
I,
on in
I
South
doubt that's
Carolina.
limited to the South. I doubt that's limited.
You're probably right. You do criminal work all across the country, so you're probably
Yeah.
right that it's probably not. I just find that in my Alabamas, Mississippi's, one, they don't charge officers, or very rarely. Two, uh, it takes a great deal of work before you can. And I tell these families often, I'm like, look, I just want to be able to get you answers. I don't know what's going to happen at the end of the day, but I want to be able to tell you what happened to your loved one. I mean, we still have jurisdictions that don't have body cameras.
Yeah,
Right,
So,
because why would you? Because then you can get to the truth.
well, not only that, but the best witness is also dead. Very rarely, and like my client that was beaten, I said, dude, you are probably one of my luckier clients because you're actually alive. Most of my clients are dead.
Mhm.
And that is, you go to the funerals with these families, you plan estates for these families, you have to deal with the mothers of their children, you have to deal with their mothers, you have to you provide mental health counseling for them. You find yourself not just being a lawyer, but you are an activist, you are a comms director, you're a psychologist, a psychiatrist, sociologist, and a lawyer in
Mhm.
this field. So I
Mhm.
tell people that I wish this work that I do didn't exist.
Yeah.
So, Bakari, you've been talking mostly about excessive force cases. And I also know you do jail condition cases where people are dying
Mhm.
in jails from neglect, and that's even a higher burden to prove. But talk about some of those cases. I
Yeah,
know some here in South Carolina. It's really
yeah, I
a
yeah. The
situation.
Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center is kind of my jumping off point. I represent the family of Lasan Butler, who died, who was suffering from a mental health issue, was placed in the SHU, which all of us have been in a SHU, which is a special
Mhm.
housing unit. They're called different things around the country in different areas, but it's where it's like 23 and 1, I believe. Like you're locked away for the overwhelming majority of the day, usually 23 hours. You get 1 hour. Is usually your worst of the worst. But in poorer areas, due to lack of resources, they usually just put people who have mental health issues there. Um, my guy died from dehydration, which nobody should die from. After 11 days, he was yelling and screaming about rats biting him. He had little marks uh, that were indicated in medical records could have been rodent activity. It was a
Oh my
very difficult thing. We've since then we probably have over 30 uh, inmates that we represent, and these are people who haven't been sentenced yet. Let's not free or found guilty yet, let
Is
alone
this,
sentenced.
is this a class action or?
It's not. Everybody has an individual damage. Everybody has an individual harm. And so, like, they didn't have running water in the cells. The
Oh
toilets were
my God.
backed up, feces everywhere. His room was despicable, deplorable. I have individuals who've been raped. I have individuals who've been beaten, who've been stabbed.
I
Um,
know the ACLU does a lot of this stuff. Are they involved in this at all or?
so we have some amazing lawyers here in South Carolina. Nikki Shutt, for example, is somebody who goes out and does this type of what is that, public interest law type work, where
Yeah.
they go in and
Yeah.
they've actually filed I believe it's a class. They may have been filing on individuals about the conditions of Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center. And because of my political relationships in civil rights cases and these cases as well, I'm usually able to call individuals in Washington, D.C. to get them to shine a light on it. And so one of the things that institutions such as Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center do not want is they do not want the federal government looking into them. Many, when in officer involved shootings, the last thing they want is a federal investigation into that shooting. But we've been fortunate enough that the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice has opened up investigations into both the Charleston County Detention Center and the Richland County Detention Center. So that's going to be really good, because what you don't want is, like, we all have kids. Well, Jim, you have kids, right?
Yeah, I have more than my fair share. Yes, I do.
Yes, I have an 18-year-old and two 5-year-olds. And the last thing I want is my 18-year-old to be like in Columbia and get an underage drinking ticket, have to go to Alvin S. Glenn and worry about getting beat to death or, raped or stabbed in prison. And that is the type of things that are happening to inmates over there. And I am utterly disappointed in the Richland County Council. I've said that publicly and privately into their face. I wish that law enforcement agency would take it over, but here we are.
How do you have an 18-year-old when you were 11 years old during the OJ trial?
Because I married a seasoned woman, and it's my bonus child.
So I want to talk about the OJ case.
I'm a cougar hunter, Jim. I'm a cougar hunter. Cougar hunter.
You outkicked your coverage. Your wife Ellen is the class of that household. I can attest.
That's an understatement.
Wait, your wife is older than you, Bakari?
Substantially.
Really?
He's the toy boy of the house.
That's right. How old are you, Bakari?
39.
And your wife is?
48.
She looks great.
She'll be 40. She'll be 49 in October.
She doesn't age. She doesn't age, but Bakari does.
I'm older than her, but she looks great. Age is a number. Fuck it. Okay, so OJ Simpson. I wanted to talk to you about this. Like, I've been dying to talk to you about this because it is a case that is old, 3 decades old, but recently stirred up a lot of anger and a lot of sort of, there's still division around this case. He died a few weeks ago, and I think that the case still reflects America's racial divide. His 1995 acquittal was a defining moment in our understanding of race, policing, and justice. And I think it still sort of remains about the different realities of white and Black America. So, back in the day, I actually, when the murder happened, Nicole Simpson lived like 2 blocks from where I grew up. And I remember I was in UCLA. I just started college, and I had just started college. I was in college anyway. I was trying to go to summer abroad. I couldn't get into my place. The roads were closed. They thought OJ was, hiding in the condo. The whole thing was so surreal. And then coincidentally, a very prominent defense attorney in LA bought that condo because it was like worth nothing after. So anyway, I had all those personal memories of it, but I followed that trial so closely. I was so fascinated, even though I wasn't a lawyer. And a lot of Black people in my community and just in America were just, it was an exhilarating result for them. This happened at the heels of Rodney King. And they were like, yeah, finally, and then the whites, of course, were like, this is the race card. This is ridiculous. And then I think, the evidence obviously was very questionable in terms of the DNA, the tampering, the crime scene, the lying lead investigator who was a racist pig and documented and lied about being a racist pig. There's all those things as well. But I want to know your opinion do you think, first of all, that his acquittal was owed merely to the race card against that backdrop of what was going on here in LA with Rodney King and all that? Or do you see it as sort of a perfect combination of factors given the evidentiary issues as well?
I mean, I think you also left out the fact that Johnny Cochran was his lawyer. And so you left out the fact that even with even with all of those things you named, you had to have someone as skilled as Johnny Cochran, who Johnny Cochran actually represented my father back when he went to prison for refusing to go to Vietnam. OJ's case falls in terms of those kind of cases that draw up distinct feelings of racial animus. You think about my father's trial in 1968, not the one that Johnny represented him on, but the Orangery Massacre trial where he went to prison. You think about Michael Jackson's trial, which kind of drew those same lines. In OJ's trial, of course, Mark Furman was a key player in that.
Horrible.
The style of Johnny Cochran. And, OJ is a complicated figure because OJ never wanted to be Black. And yet his Black folk wrapped their arms around him in this particular case because we had seen what this system was like. Now, I have had the opportunity to. There's only one person I know in the world who knows this case better than anybody, and it's not Johnny. It's not Judge Ito. It's actually OJ and Jeffrey Tubin. And I've had the opportunity to talk to Jeffrey about this case and posited a lot of theories about this case and who done it, as they say. Even was it OJ's son, or
Right.
could it have
Now,
been somebody
I'm
else?
curious what Tubin says about the son, because I remember at the time the son worked in
Cuban
a,
will tell you. Cuban will look you dead in the face and tell you that there's no doubt in his mind. He's
the son
hundred
was
percent
there.
certain.
Huh?
No, that OJ Simpson did this and did this alone. He said
Okay.
the only thing
I'll
the
put this
only thing.
I'll put this out there because it didn't really quite make the news, but the son worked in a restaurant called The Farm. And he was known for being not only punctual, but early, never missing work, never calling in sick. And that night, or whatever, that day, whenever the murders occurred, he just didn't show up to work. He had a shift. He didn't show up. He didn't call. He never went back to work after that. And that
Yeah.
to me was,
I've raised that to him because every time I would be on TV with him, I would go do my OJ research and ask another question. The only thing he attempted, and Tubin actually attempted to go interview OJ when he was in prison in Nevada, to no avail. And so that was just something that he was never able to do. It was a fascinating case, though. It really was.
I give Johnny Cochran all the credit. He also
For sure.
discovered my friend Sean Chapman Hawley, who was a public defender at the time, and kind of picked her out and added her to the team. I think she was the only female on the defense team. But I also have to say, I don't think there's ever been, they called it the dream team. Maybe that's even where the term came from, but there's never been anything like that, I think, in any high profile case. Like you had Jim and
you can't ignore,
Dick, they're their own team for Murdoch or whatever. But like that team it was like Barry Sheck for DNA, F. Lee Bailey, Johnny. And Robert, Bob Shapiro, who's a good friend of mine. I'm actually working on a case with him now. He just sat at the council table. Like he put the team together, but you had him and Kardashian, who were sort of like the managing partners of that team. And then you had these amazing lawyers,
So tell me why Kardashian had to withdraw. Did he have the murder weapon? Did OJ give him the murder weapon? I've always thought that, but
that's an interesting theory.
Well, there is OJ, and I want to say Kardashian in particular got furious at Jeffrey Tubin because it was Kardashian, because there were only apparently two people in the world that knew that OJ had failed his polygraph. And when Jeffrey wrote his book, somehow, some way, he got knowledge that OJ failed the polygraph. And Jim, plainly speaking, about failing polygraphs, not direct.
Yeah, I couldn't pass a polygraph on my name. I mean, so
yeah. So wait, so could OJ 2.0 get away with it in 2024, you think? Or things have changed?
I don't. First of all, there were a lot of ramifications from that trial that I wasn't even aware of. For example, one of the reasons that we're not able to watch Donald Trump in court this week, or Stormy Daniels' testimony, is that after Judge Ito became Judge Ito and did the thing that judges do when they put on robes sometimes in front of cameras, there were a lot of municipalities, states, etc., that took cameras out of TVs. New York, cameras out of courtrooms, New York being one of them. And I had no idea that was the case. So there were a lot of ramifications, I think detrimental ramifications.
So that's not
it's hard. First of all, if OJ was in South Carolina, he would have been under the prison.
Yeah, no doubt.
LA is just a different breed. You don't
LA, but let me say this, LA is a different breed, but that courthouse is a different breed. That's our central courthouse up the street from where I live, and it pulls just the best jury in the county. And OJ's jury was predominantly Black. So that brings me to the next question, which you kind of touched on, which is, so he always sort of distanced himself from the idea of being Black, and he acted like he's white. His wife was white. He, I mean, he was a celebrity. He was an athlete, and he had privilege. So you can't say he had white privilege, but he had celebrity privilege.
Yeah.
And so how is it that, how do you reconcile the color of his skin with really his status? I mean, you can't say
Because it goes back to the
regular Black
initial.
man is what I'm trying to say.
It goes back to the initial framing and how sometimes we have to adjust our lens, because I think you're looking at OJ in this case as an individual, when many Black folk did not look at him as an individual. We
Right.
looked at a system that was unjust.
Right.
And OJ was the latest victim in that system. It's a lot like how we started the conversation when in civil rights cases, and how we get caught up in the individuals. We have to, when I evaluate the criminal justice system, I don't evaluate it based upon singular players or individual actors. I evaluate it based upon what I view as a system of injustice.
Yeah.
And that's how a lot of people view the OJ Simpson trial.
Yeah. Well, Chris Darden's running for judge. I'm voting for him.
I saw it. The only thing I know about Chris Darden is that he was about to represent Nipsey Hussle's killer for like 5 minutes, and that didn't go well.
No, I'm not.
He's given credit for asking OJ to try the glove on. I mean, that was whether he did it or not. I've heard him being interviewed saying, well, sometimes you just have to go for broke. I guess they thought they were losing at that point in time, but that was
he's an interesting guy.
Apparently OJ didn't you can tell me if I'm wrong, but apparently OJ didn't take his arthritis medicine that morning, so his hand swelled.
And he had had a glove on underneath that. And he's an actor. So,
and the blood makes it shrink, apparently, kind of.
Yeah, no.
The fabric. But yeah, I mean, Marsha Clark, I thought was a good DA. I'm not sure about Chris Darden. Chris Darden taught in law school. Huh?
Since Johnny Cochran's closing, we've all, when we go try a criminal case, we're all looking for that tagline. If it,
yeah, you're right.
You must quit. I mean, we're always trying to find it in our cases, and I don't think I've ever tried a case where someone didn't say the night before, if it doesn't fit, you must have quit.
Right. That was just perfect. Like, that doesn't apply to any case. It
is legend.
Yeah.
So, you guys both in South Carolina. I was kind of following that Mica Miller case, and then the autopsy came back that she committed suicide. I just thought it was interesting because, I mean, we're obviously, this podcast is about the presumption and how media, convicts people. And literally this pastor, I mean, I don't know what kind of a monster he is. There may have been domestic violence, who knows? But literally he was convicted in those days, but before the autopsy came out. The idea that, he must have killed her, he had every reason to kill her, and the family's going after him. And so as it turns out, that according to the autopsy, there's suicide. Is there any concern about it not having been suicide? I mean, is there, because people are still, wondering.
I don't know enough about that case. All I can tell you is I saw that case was in Horry County, and I knew it wasn't gonna make sense because don't nothing happen along the coastline that makes sense. Okay, and then it ended up in Robinson County in North Carolina, which is the same. So, by the way, I have a civil rights case in Robinson County right now, and guess what? They don't have body cameras. So, I feel like.
Is that where Myrtle Beach is?
No, Myrtle Beach is in Horry County.
That's
Horry
where
County's Yeah, but she actually killed it. She killed herself in Robinson County.
Yes, that's true. Okay.
In North Carolina. So, I mean, Sarah, this is a nothing burger, but I mean, and you're plugged into this toxic group out there. They're trying to find injustice where it doesn't exist, and they're trying to find the next Murdoch case, and that's what.
Yeah, exactly. But Jim, you're right. You guys are used to working in your system. I think the Murdaugh case really just put the spotlight on how different things are down there. My hat's off to you, because I don't think I could practice law down there, and I've been around the country, but it's so I think that there's also that, because there's a lot of stuff that happens in South Carolina that just doesn't make the news. But I saw this in Fitz News and I was like, oh no, this is like another weird story in South
No,
Carolina.
he seems to be a pretty terrible human being.
Yeah.
But there is a big jump from being a terrible human being
Being
to
a
being a
killer.
murderer.
Yeah.
That's a jump.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people, I don't think he'll do it, because by being such an awful human being, he can't sit his ass down for a deposition. But there's been a lot of defaming of him going around.
100%. It's
But
ridiculous.
there's not much he can do about it. The first thing I would do if he came to my office and said, "Can you sue XYZ for defamation?" I'd be like, "Bro, you can't sit down for no deposition. A videotape deposition of you as a pastor would destroy you."
It's funny because I just don't go there. I'm not going to name names, but a producer that Jim knows as well reached out to me and sent me the link. Oh, this story, meaning we're going to talk about this tonight. And I said, oh, well, I just looked it up. Her autopsy came back. She died by suicide. She made a call. She's going to go kill herself. She bought a gun. And they're like, yeah, but, and I said, I'm not going there. I'm like,
yeah, there was a 911 call. Yeah,
he had an alibi. He was with his girlfriend in Charleston.
Somewhere else. So forget it. Okay, before we let you go, I saw you on CNN and I was like, I have to ask you, what the hell is going on with RFK Jr.'s brain and the worm? Please.
I don't know, man. Jim is from that generation. I'd have to let him. You got to tell me what type of drugs and stuff y'all were doing back then, because
back in the day, I ate a lot of worms when we got to the bottom of the
tequila. I don't know if I feel bad for the worm or feel bad for RFK. I don't know.
Is that? I mean, I can't. It's so bizarre. This is a candidate. Like, it's so bizarre to me. Like, we're going, Biden's old, Trump's old, and then this guy has, like, his brain got eaten by worms. Like, what is that real? Like, what is going on? I saw you, like, seriously standing up with my friend Sarah Seidner and someone else, and you're like having a serious conversation about this.
I don't know how serious I was. My advice was that I tell my clients to not get high before they do depositions, because I felt like that's probably where RFK Jr. was, but that is for somebody else to evaluate.
Yeah. He got very defensive on MSNBC yesterday.
So Sarah, I want to, before we finish, I want to switch topics very briefly. Bakari has his own podcast, and I'll tell you, I didn't realize you had a podcast, Bakari, until I was on a very long plane ride, and I was listening to a podcast, and shit, there's Bakari Sellers. I know him. And you're interviewing LeBron James. Do you remember that?
LeBron?
No, you're interviewing some NBA basketball player. Do I have?
Oh, I interviewed Vince Carter, Antoine Jameson. I haven't interviewed LeBron yet, but I have a long list of them. Danny Green.
No,
I've interviewed Deshaun Watson. I've interviewed them all.
I swear I'm okay. So I'm totally confused. But beyond that, you're wearing the women's Final Four sweatshirt, and you appear to be an honorary member of the women's Lady Gamecocks. And
yes,
Dawn Staley's toy boy.
There you go.
How did you become so close to the women's basketball team? And I know it has to be great fun.
Oh, it's a lot of fun. They are an amazing group of women. Dawn is one of the most amazing human beings I've ever been around. She's a really good friend of mine.
Does your wife know this?
My wife is a part, and she travels with us all the time. Women's basket. Jesus, you guys are old and antiquated. You can hang out with the women's basketball team. It's all good. It's a sport that I've loved for a long time that's finally gets the attention they deserve. And we're actually really, really good. So it makes it easy to love them. But shout out to those girls. They do a lot of great work. The coaching staff is amazing. Dawn is my sister friend, and I absolutely love them all. Those girls are like, they're like all our little sisters. We take care of them in this city, always.
So I got to tell you, Sarah, over Christmas this past year, 2023, Bakari says, "Hey Jim, it's Christmas Eve. He said I got a few people coming over. How about stop by and have a drink, before Christmas?" And I said, "Sure, I'll stop by." I showed up, and it is the biggest party that in Columbia has seen all year, and I think half of Charlotte came down, and there were all these luxury people out there. And
It
then,
was a fun. Yeah, we had the piano. We had the
I
big
know some
drink.
people were upset they didn't get invited.
yeah, well,
It's
it was
Christmas
just
Eve. You weren't
it was a few
complaining
of his closest friends, and of course, Coach Staley was there, and Bakari was nice enough to introduce me, and she was, one of many people who just was glued to the Murdaugh case, and she told me that on Wednesdays during the Murdaugh trial they had basketball practice at like in the morning, and so she made them practice at 5 a.m. to be done, so she could go watch the trial. So she was,
Everybody watched it. Everybody knows who Jim Griffin is. They
Yeah.
watched it.
Actually, you know what's funny? It just dawned on me. I was talking to Bakari when the trial started at the beginning. I was talking to Bakari, and he was in and out of court on his own cases. He wasn't coming out there in whatever it's called, Colton County.
Walterboro.
Yeah, Walterboro. And I, like, of course, assumed he's probably there because he's got one of the witnesses, whatever. And so I was like blowing up his phone with all my questions. And he's like, I don't go there every day, right? Like, I have like my own work. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And
I did 2 days. I did 2 days in that courtroom, and that was enough.
Enough. Yeah. And then you said you really should talk to Jim Griffin. And as I was like, bro's on trial, like, he's not going to take my call, and he sure did. So I was like, I was stoked, and I think you actually connected.
I'm sorry. I apologize, Jim. That's my fault.
I owe you one. I'm still trying to find the right connection for you. That's
all right. Tell Maggie I said hello, guys, and thank you so much.
So listen, thank you. I know you're in an airport and you got to go, for taking time out of your book tour, your marathon schedule, and all that stuff to be with us. And people can find you on social media, South Carolina. They can find your books on Amazon. And so I invite everybody to follow and follow closely Bakari Sellers. Yeah, Jim?
I highly recommend his children's book. I have one for my grandchild, and my grandchild on the way. We'll be getting another one, which I need you to sign here soon.
I got you. I'll take care of you always.
And then looking forward to reading your new book.
Yeah, me too. And you can find us on all podcast platforms as well as on YouTube. And until next time, Jim, we
rest.